I'm improvising with this tie today. We are live. We're just waiting for people to come in, and all right, Twitter is giving me a problem, but we're going to keep trying. Let's see if we go live. It's battling to connect. Twitter is battling to connect, but we are live on Instagram and on Facebook. So if your friends are on Twitter, you can tell them to join us here, because I'm in Joburg. I don't know what's going on with the device that's on Twitter, but we're going to start just now at 4 o'clock. Welcome. It's good to see you. Good to see you. Tell me where you're from. Tell me where you're calling from. Everybody. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Celeste. It's so nice to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time. Celeste, my friend from Cape Town. Let me see. Where are you? Where are you coming from? Let me know so that I can welcome you properly. Thank you so much, Tony, for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us. We're talking to Professor Siphamandla Zondi, Tshwane Business School. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Patricia Tokozani joined. Thank you. Linda from Boxburg. Thank you for joining us. Takani from Venda. University of Venda is here. UP is in the house. UP, there's a lot of UP in the house. And of course, Cape Town is in the house. University of Pretoria, University of Limpopo, University of Venda, Northwest University, Potchefstroom campus, Tshwane University of Technology. Mafikeng campus of Northwest University is also in the house. And we have, Prof. Zondi is coming. Yes, Prof. Zondi is here. Monday. It's going to be lit. It's going to be fantastic. All the way from UJ. Palesa is joining us. From UWC, we can see Lizzo. And Vets in the house. We don't start until Vets gets into the house, right? So we're waiting for the Vets Postgraduate Association. Vets University in the house. Good to see you, Gwena. Good to see you. Tell your friends who are on Twitter that... we are here. Twitter is acting up. Zuki, so good to see you on Facebook. So good to see you. DSA is also in the house. Welcome. Prof. Researcher, University of Limpopo, UNISA. Welcome. As you know, we wait a little bit for latecomers to come into the room. And then we'll get on with it. University of Mpumalanga in the house. University of Limpopo. Yes, Tabo, we are here. Oh yes, Tabo, UP in the house. Good to see you. Okay, should I say Sasko in the house? Well, there you go. CPUT, UNISA, good day, Spusiso, good to see you. UNISA Molokhadi, good to see you. Welcome. I'm gonna ask Monde or Momo or Charles to go to Twitter. Like, tell people that I can't connect on my device that's going on Twitter. I don't know what's going on. So if they want to join this conversation, they must come to Instagram or Facebook, because Twitter keeps saying it's connecting, but it's not connecting, right? So just tell people to come. Saus in the house. Tabo, welcome. Sorry, I forgot that upgrade. Tabo Gumede in the house. Welcome. Good to see you. SMU. Sony, thank you. Thank you very much, Monde. Thank you very much for doing that, because I don't think Twitter will get on. I can see that it's not catching on, but we are on track. We can see SMU. Let me see how many people in the house. We're just waiting for 6 more people on Facebook, and then we will start. Right? I can see Instagram looking healthy. Slulukelo, thank you very much for joining us. Sunday Ewoodzi. We're waiting for 4 more people on Facebook. Tell them to join us, and then we will start. We will start just now. Tell the ones who are on Twitter that today we are on Instagram and Facebook, because Twitter is not catching on with us. We're talking about decolonizing higher education. So let's get on with it. I thought we should talk about decolonizing higher education. As you know, last week we talked about transformation. And if you think about it, since our liberation, we've been talking about transforming universities, and just mainly about employment equity, about access, about institutional culture, and so on. And with the fees must fall, a protest, a movement, we were challenged as universities to decolonize higher education. And the question is, what is this decolonization? And of course, if you've been following on Twitter since I put up the poster, there's been so much back and forth about it. Some people are angry that we are even talking about decolonization. And some people are saying, how can you talk about decolonization if you're still putting on lipstick? Okay, so there's a perception that decolonization is about going back to the 18th century, living like our great parents lived. That's not my understanding of why the debate or why the decolonization project is important. And Professor Zondi will clue us in when we get him on board. But the decolonization debate is really a contestation about knowledge. The knowledge that students are exposed to in our universities. Where does it come from? Who owns it? Why is it this one and not any other? Is it possible to expose our students to other knowledge systems? And what's the downside of not exposing students to other knowledge systems? Frankly speaking, from where I'm sitting, I think we are impoverished if we don't expose our students to diverse knowledge systems. If we only expose them to Western knowledge, that's a limited education that we are sharing with our students. We've got to expose them to other knowledge, whether it's knowledge from the East, knowledge from the South. It's important that students are clued up. And of course, when you expose people to knowledge from other parts of the world, it's not as if you're exposing people to that knowledge as a gospel, just to take it and not to critique it. You're exposing it as a resource. First of all, if it's knowledge from Africa, the students will get to know themselves, appreciate where they come from, but they'll also get to grow that knowledge. Knowledge that's not engaged with, it doesn't grow. It doesn't influence what we do, who we become, and what we produce. And so it's important that we make it available. So the debates about, don't wear lipstick if you're talking about decolonization, tell me how quantum mechanics can be decolonized. They're a red herring. I mean, of course, quantum mechanics will be quantum mechanics. That's not the issue. So don't get that petty, right? Open up and look at what does it mean to only have universities focusing on Western knowledge, to have a world where Western knowledge is the norm and everything else is shut down. It's an impoverished world. In fact, it is a disadvantaged world, and maybe that's why we are here where we are at right now. I'm going to ask Professor Zondi to join me, and Professor Zondi will break it down. Of course, I see the Pastrium squad is jumping up and down. My favorite professor is in the house today. Professor Zondi is Professor of Politics, is now at the University of Johannesburg. He was at the University of Pretoria not long ago. Sipamanda, welcome.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to everybody.
Afternoon. The squad is jumping up and down. They are already writing Professor Zondi, welcome, and they write researcher and then ER capital.
They are mocking my English.
No.
They need to be decolonized. Researcher.
So
I can understand.
They've been asking me.
I accept the mock.
They've been asking me where you are, why are you not coming back? And so I'm glad that today we are here. I was supposed to speak to Thandi, who we got disturbed by technology last week, but she can't be with us. So we're gonna have a longish time with you. So, and I'm going to ask you to introduce this idea of decolonization. I'm gonna try to take it step by step so that you introduce it to us like we are novices in the space. What is decolonization about? What is it about, really?
No, thank you very much. It's a huge subject. We cannot easily define it and easily completely explain it here. But I do want to say that it is, there are things that it is not. It is not the reform of the university and the higher education sector. It is even not the changing of the faces that represent these universities.
Okay.
Definitely, it is not a mere replacement of what is there.
Oh, good.
Definitely, decolonizing is not fighting against someone else.
Yes.
It's not against someone else.
Yes.
And perhaps lastly, it is not just an angry movement.
That's very important.
But definitely in the name decolonizing, we can literally define it as removing that which is colonial about the higher education system. Decolonize, detox, to remove that which is colonial about the university. And decolonizing the higher education system can be misconstrued, but simply because we don't fully understand what is colonial about university.
Yeah.
Unless we carefully define what is it that is colonial about university and exclude that which is not colonial about university, which is just particular, maybe objectionable but annoying or something, but not necessarily colonial about university. Yeah. We may ascribe decolonial to what has nothing to do with decolonizing the university.
That's a very important take. But universities, maybe let's break it down from that.
Yes, let us first go back to what is colonial. Because the arriving of the British in Southern Africa, or the French in West Africa, or the Portuguese in Southeast Africa and in West Africa. That was the arrival. That was occupation. But what made it colonial was the fact that it was based on a particular approach to life. That was totalizing. And that approach had a number of features or logics that it was based on. It was the logic of lines. People who came here came with a logic of straight lines. And straight lines equating to order, equating to correctness, equating to advance, equating to modern and stuff like that. So they came with a logic fundamentally behind many things that they did in religion, in education, in any area of life, was the logic of lines. And they came among a people who had a logic of circles. The distinction between a line and a circle is that a line separates, splits, includes, excludes. The circle includes. And the only way to respond to new thing, a circle expands. The only way to respond to a new thing, a line toughens. It toughens and strengthens. So a notion of people who are inside and people who are outside, it's a logic. It's not natural. That is why the people of this part of the world believed that your being derived from including other people in your being. Umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu, mutu ke mutu kabacho. Your being derives not by distinguishing yourself, but by including others in your being. As you pursue your being with others, your own being is increased. So that logic is very different from a colonial logic, which impugned you are either in or not. That is why it draws a line about what is modern and what is traditional, what is international and what is not international. You and I know that the line is blurred. But the system speaks as if the lines are clear. It teaches us to learn that. We went to school to learn how to draw a line straight. When you were able to draw a line straight on a blackboard, then you were taught to have advanced in your thinking. It was a logic that I would think I'm being taught maths when I'm actually behind maths. I'm being taught a logic of lines.
Aha.
And my logic of circle is being removed.
Yes.
In other words, my logic of including is being replaced with a logic of distinguishing and dividing.
Yeah. Yeah.
The more I acquire that, then the system will introduce another logic. That logic is a logic of hierarchy, what we call grading.
Mm-hmm.
Those who don't acquire our system get a low grade, and they may have to repeat that level. And those who acquire our system, we give them a higher grade, then they move up the system. That has very little to do with how much they know, how well they can relate with others, and how useful they are in their communities. No, it's about whether they meet our standard of advancement according to the lines.
Yes.
And these lines, therefore, when they are put together, they create a cycle. They create a hierarchy.
Pyramid. A hierarchy, yes.
A pyramid in its logic requires that there must be few at the top.
Yes.
And many must be at the bottom.
Yes. Yes. So in a
Secondly,
circle,
the pyramid introduces to us that there is a top and there is a bottom.
Yes.
When actually the difference between you and me may not be that you are top and I'm bottom. It may be that you are located this side, I'm located that side.
Yes.
But in the system, we're supposed to locate ourselves in relation to bottom and top. Now, you have to from grade 1, and from there to university.
Because what
it's a logic.
Yes, I want to pause you here so that because you are explaining the logic, the logic as brought here by the colonialists, that divides, right? So now if it's a circle, how would it work? What would be a parallel? Let's say this didn't come. How would it work in where there's no straight lines? It's a circle. Is it the idea that because we are better together, so it doesn't really mean I've got to know everything because we are together? So I would still progress in what I know, and the understanding would be that you have other knowledge in the group, or what would it be?
Yeah, that is true. The way I like illustrating it is that my uncle, who dropped out of what was then called Standard 1, which is grade 3 today, dropped out because he wanted to insist on including his knowledge in the school. But the school was designed to exclude his knowledge and replace it with a new knowledge. What they did, they drew a big A, the A in capital letters, and they asked him what it was. He said it looked like a dog kennel. And they said, no, it's an A.
Yes.
That is said, no. What is an A? I don't know. What is an A? Where I come from, a village I come from, I don't know a thing called an A. Is it an animal? Is it a thing? What I see in that drawing is a dog kennel or a badly built house. So they called him stubborn because he was insisting on bringing the knowledge from the village into a mathematics classroom.
Yes.
And he was refusing what we were won over, where we were saying it's an A. Repeat after me, A. Repeat again, A. Again, A. Until you cram that thing is A. And you lose any other sense you might have heard of what it was. So the challenge there was, it was not to beef up what you know, but it was to empty you of what you know and infuse in you a knowledge that has been packaged for us somewhere. And the logic is, if you acquire, in other words, if you conform, you pass. If you don't conform, you fail. The logic of lines. Even if my uncle was the best social being in school, the most helpful person, and would relate with different kinds of people, which means wise, that wisdom won't count as long as it doesn't score in the hierarchical model of knowledge.
That's a powerful analogy. That's a powerful illustration there. So in this illustration, what you are saying is what we are teaching, what's colonial about what we're teaching is not always the content, but it's what's behind the content that's been introduced through the content. So then,
Yes.
yeah. So then, if we were to decolonize, how would you do that?
Come again?
If we were to decolonize the curriculum, because from what I'm hearing is that it's not just the content, it's also what the content carries, the logic that the content of what is being taught carries. That's colonial. Yes. So it shapes how you think, how you see the world.
Yes.
And that's much more powerful than what you memorize, the content that you then, there's something bigger that comes with it that's going to last a lifetime. So what does decolonizing then mean if you want to remove? Remember you said decolonize, remove that which is colonial. So what would be that?
What is important, just to complete that story, is that the logic also taught us that in order to succeed, you must be in front of some people. Yes. You and I went to schools where your biggest prize was to be named among number 1 to number 10. You'll be put up in class and you'll be celebrated because number 1 and number 10 are not just numbers, but they are designation about who is in front and who is behind. You are not supposed to have 3 number 1s. There must only be 1 number 1. In other words, the logic is you must not succeed with others. You must succeed against or over, above others. So it taught us arrogance. It taught us, and the whole organization of the system, you'll be set in front of a class or be set at the back of the class, because by design, the class has a front and has a back. That's a logic itself.
Yes.
And you will be located in that class. And that location is not just coincidental. It is meant to signal to you certain logics of life that will live with you long after you've forgotten the content of the class. So what we actually learned in class is the hidden transcript of the colonial, the hidden transcript of behavior. That is why even when we exclaim, when we see a snake, you exclaim in English, not English language, but in English way. You learn even sensibilities. You learned even mannerism from the system. Though it's not written in the curriculum, but it is part of the curriculum hidden in there. Therefore, decolonizing the curriculum, the syllabus that you see on the surface, without decolonizing the practices, the logics, the assumptions, the worldviews, the paradigms that lie below it, we will simply be peppering over cracks. And that is what that I fought therefore. That decolonizing is fundamentally dealing with the hidden elements of what we see, the hidden transcript, the logics, the paradigms, and all of those. That's the most important thing. In everything, in the institutional culture, in the institutional practices, in the policies, in the curriculum itself, in the pedagogical practices in class, dealing with people, in the HR practices, and all of those things. All of those logics need to be dealt with, but we need to understand them first before we can ever disentangle them.
Yeah, but so I mean, it's powerful what you say in Sipamandla, but you are a university professor.
Yes.
So the structure that you are in and your position is it's a central part of that colonial logic. We are in the system and we are saying decolonize, but we want this structure and hierarchy that's colonial to stay. Shouldn't that be where we start? Not only that, I mean, even the structure of the Senate, who goes in and who doesn't go in, who's got the right to speak and who doesn't. The secretary in the Department of Chemistry can't just come into Senate. They don't qualify. Neither does the junior lecturer or lecturer there. So it's a hierarchy. So if you are saying, well, if you change the curriculum, you're just peppering, you've got to change that which is behind. What if then the arguments say, let's start with ourselves? Those of us who are talking about decolonization, how would we start that? Let's start with disrupting this hierarchy that we are in.
For me, it starts with first understanding what is colonial about a university.
Okay.
And there's no university that has escaped that.
Absolutely.
It's colonial, we experience it everywhere.
Well, the idea
to know is for me a beginning of change. Consciousness is the beginning of change. There is no point, Prof, rushing to implement change when we do not understand the problem first.
Yeah.
We must spend enough time identifying the problem and how it manifests. Yeah. I just named one or two logics. Yeah. There may be hundreds of logics in chemistry that are fed through political science, to sociology, to economics. You think you are learning about how to run the economy when you are actually learning about how to be at the bottom of the economic ladder.
Yes. Yes.
Because what is said is different from what is demonstrated. Yeah. We learn both. We learn what is actually vocalized. Yeah. And we also learn what is signaled but not vocalized. But we need first to spend time identifying those areas that represent what is colonial. Secondly, then identify those that we can deal with already without the need of structures and stuff. But I, as a professor, given all the influence I have over a large number of younger colleagues who are coming behind me and students, we're supposed to call them students, I have a responsibility to begin in that small cycle, even if I have access to 10, to conscientize them, that to be careful of the hidden transcript behind what I teach or what we teach, because I must not assume that I'm no longer colonial simply because I'm speaking decolonial.
Yes.
I am also colonial.
Yes.
I am in the process of trying to deal with it, but I should never come to a position where I think other people are colonial. And I have arrived.
Yes. Yeah.
That humility is also a critical step of decolonization. Absolutely. Accepting that we are colonial ourselves. Yes. Not that we are savers to save the world. Because I'm a professor who can write in big words, look at other people, and that I speak eloquently about colonization and the colonial system and the decolonization. I am myself working on myself daily to watch out for those signals that tell me that this I learned and it does not belong to humanity, but it's a colonial logic that I learned. It has been normalized. I must denormalize what has been normalized. But it begins with me, because I can't do to others what I cannot do, I cannot done to myself. I'll be replicating the colonial logic.
Yeah, you see, Sipamandla, you are a senior professor, and you are saying you've got influence, you make your students what's behind. Here we are, we've hired a new lecturer, and even if they have a PhD, they're here, they've got a class of first years to teach physics or whatever, sociology. You know, in a position to do what you can do. So what do we do then? What do we do to that? What do we do to help that professor, that young academic who is interested in decolonization, and he's saying, how do I do it? I understand there's a logic behind all of this. And I understand that I must decolonize. Now, I'm teaching this. Where do I start?
For me,
the students, by the way, themselves are not innocent. Students coming to your class, whether you're at University A in your physics class, they have friends in University B, C, D, and they are comparing. Okay, so what is it that we're doing? My friends who are here are doing that. Am I going to be able to get out of here and compete? and I'm asking here, there's a tension in my view, and we've got to break down, where do you start? Of course, the humility to say, I myself, in my way of being, I've lived in this system so long that I am so colonized. I'm colonial in my thinking, in my looking at things. So I've got to disrupt that. I understand that. But now I've got to teach the university. The idea of the university itself is colonial.
So we need to repent first.
Yeah. Amen.
We need to repent first that we are product of the system, and we are reproducing the system, even if we are not doing it willingly, consciously, or even enthusiastically.
Yeah.
We need to first repent, accept that we are colonial, because that's a big part of the process, and help others also repent, so that they are able to distance themselves from that which they learned, so that they are able to identify these things. But the things we talk about, we cannot identify them until we have got to a certain level of consciousness, so that we are able to distinguish what looks normal and what is normal. Because normal and not normal can be very blurred. We need to teach our eyes, we need to teach ourselves to do that. Secondly, we need to pray a Frantz Fanon prayer. In that book, Black Skin, White Mask, he says later on, towards the end, he says, body, teach me to question. That was the prayer. Teach me to question. He was accepting that though he is bringing all these critical thoughts and all that, but he still was liable of being trapped again because of his upper middle class life and being part of the thing, being caught up in the mores of the system. But he needed to consciously be alert, almost not being paranoid, but being alert of elements that might be in me, in my behavior. For example, as a man, I need to be alert of the fact that part of the colonial logic is a particular form of patriarchy that I acquired. So I can be very radical in political thought and still be very patriarchal in my personal relationship with others. So I need to constantly repent of that too. As a Christian, I may have imported certain Christian mores that are not actually Christian, but are part of the imperial penetration of the Christian religion. I need to be able to disentangle that, kind of pathways to the white Jesus, even as I proceed with that. So there's a lot of questioning that I need to do. Thirdly, I need then to teach my students to question what is taken for granted. So we sit down with a student and I say, I want to do research. What research want to do? I want to go to Matotsana. I want to look at their problems of access to water. Then I ask them, who said access to water is their most important problem right now that you must research? What if you went there and had pretend that you were visiting, commune with them, join them in an event, and then identify what they need to know, rather than coming like a missionary, coming with your problem, which has been approved by your own ethics committee of your own middle-class people at university who have never been to Matosana, and who come with it packaged. Who come to Matosana people, they must respond to your question and not to their question.
Their question. Unless you are a child of Matosana, you grew up there, now you are at university, you have a sense of what the problems are. And here's the thing, you see, Spamandla, what you are explaining about the students spending time with the people to understand what they're, it's great. But actually, it's a luxury. In our system, it's a luxury. You know, even if you want to do research in classrooms, if you go and say, I'm going to spend 6 months just understanding what's the problem here, so that I can actually respond to the question that it requires money, time, and all of that, which is not always available. So many students are constrained by that. And perhaps then the issue is focus on the problems that you know, where you come from.
But are we locking
Yes.
people to their locations that you can only do that because that's what you know?
Yes. Yes. And then I collect the data from a people, and then I go present it to examiners, and then it ends up in the library of a university. And the people from whom I got the data do not benefit from my data. I don't go back to them and say, this is what I found. What do you think? They disagree with me. I don't say because the ethics committee has agreed with me, then they are wrong. So there are certain things that we have to undo, which is the inherent arrogance and hierarchical order of things that we've learned, that we think is normal, and that we have to undo. So I talk to students about, we have dialogue literally daily about things that may not even be related to the actual subject matter, that are mores that we need to lose so that we become human again. Because in the colonial system, I become a professor, which is not a human. It's a thing, a professor. He becomes or she becomes a student, which is not a person, which is a thing. Behind the person we call Professor Mamuketi Pakeng is a human being that Professor VC does not fully represent. Her being is bigger than all both of these positions. How do we relate with each other on the basis of who you are rather than on the labels that limit you into a thing when you are a human being? VC is a thing. Mamkheti is a person. The name is meaningful.
Absolutely.
More meaningful than the VC name.
Absolutely. I hope my colleagues can hear you say this, because I say it in our leadership meetings. Don't call me prof and don't call me VC, call me Mamkheti, because it's a traditional name, very powerful. It says a lot and gives me a sense of who I am more than the VC's thing. Sipamanda, here's an idea. If we said part of decolonizing perhaps can include working with elders in the community who come into our classrooms, whether they have a degree or not is irrelevant. They come into the classroom as knowledgeable people of whatever they know. So if whatever you're teaching, whether public health or sociology, something like that, they come and sit and they can offer their wisdom in that space. No pressure, they offer it at the time when they feel and want to. That matter. And then we also say, we also create a possibility, and probably that possibility is there. We haven't yet had a professor who's got the guts to say, I will take this elder from the community as a course supervisor. I think if you had someone who says, I'm doing a research, I want to do research with people in Matosana, and I'm going to work with Ntate Mudise as a course supervisor. He's got no degree, maybe he doesn't even have matric, but he's an elder in the community, knows more about the community. I think that's part of doing that, because you're recognizing the knowledge that comes with a lived experience in that place that will bring some value in which the professor doesn't have.
But the logic of the school then, Prof, told us long before now, my PhD level, that Ntate Mkwena, who dropped out of school at 2, his dropping out was a signal of lack of knowledge or failure in the knowledge. How do I, after matric and 2 degrees, go to get knowledge from a person who is uneducated, which means without knowledge?
That's what you see. That's what that logic. When you disrupt that logic of our students, one way of disrupting it is making our students aware that Ntate Mukwena actually has got something to offer. But perhaps for them to see that is to see the professor affirming the Ntate Mukwena, the professor bringing Ntate Mukwena in class and saying, actually Ntate Mukwena knows about this. So he's coming as a guest lecturer today. The fact that he failed grade 9 is irrelevant. We want the knowledge that he brings from his lived experience. Then the students can realize that, wow, okay, so this is a circle. Ntate Mukwena brings something that Professor Zondi doesn't have, that Professor Pakeng doesn't have. And in this circle, then we benefit, the circle expands rather than the pyramid goes higher. You know, it might be a challenge to us professors to do that.
The way we teach methodology, Prof, already excludes Datemkwena. And it only includes Datemkwena as a thing called informant. An informant is like a spy. It's somebody who will give you only a fact, not wisdom, not insights, not knowledge. Is only a person from whom you collect basic data, and you are trained to lift this data up to a level of knowledge. You've already said what you get from them is data.
We must,
which means it's the rawest, it is lowest in the hierarchy of knowledge, and you will only get what you're looking for from him, and anything else he gives you, you will tell him to shut up, you've run out of time, because also your concept of time is part of the other logic, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
I'm trying to say,
so when I'm engaging with Datem Mkwena, I'm not engaging him from a level of a human being dealing with a human being. No, from a level of a researcher talking to an informant. Hierarchy already. And above me is a professor who's never been to Matlosana, and he's guiding me about how to deal with Datem Mkwena, and may not even know how to speak Sisuthu that Datem Mkwena speaks. But is my supervisor and is the final say on what was knowledge in what Datem Mkwena said and what is not necessary methodologically speaking.
Yes.
Powerful.
Sipamanda, you see, I studied mathematics. I want us to get to the solution. I know you studied politics. So engaging with the ideas and what is important. And I think that's important. I'm constantly battling with, if I were to solve this problem, where do I start? I understand that I'm not going to solve it all at once. And I think the important thing that for me has come out of this conversation also that people should get is that decolonization is not about throwing something out, replacing it something, and then you say, you know, that's not it. It's about dealing with the logic behind all of this. Now, if I were to start, so you said start with humility. You as the educator, from the point of humility, okay? Because you yourself are colonized in your way of thinking and your way of being. Accept it and be humble. Because this process is a learning process for me as a teacher as much as it is for the students. Number one. Number two, I want to say, as we talk, I'm thinking, if I were to solve the problem, the second thing I'll be thinking, what is out there in the community that can actually add value to this, what I'm teaching? Not as informants, but as, you know, critical voice in what I'm teaching. So I would look at this and say, what is this that I'm teaching? Can I go to Kailicha and find, you know, but I would only know that if I engage with people in Kailicha, get to know them, go to church with them, go to community centers, get to know them better, then I would get to know that there's someone who actually can be of value in my life. And frankly speaking, in a university, we don't make rules about who you invite as your guest lecturer. There's no vice chancellor who's going to say, you can't bring Tatemukwena into your class. You can. So you can bring Tatemukwena for the next 5 lectures, Tatemukwena teaching. The bringing Tatemukwena doesn't necessarily replace the professor. It's an added value. It's the circle. It's the circle expanding, right? So I'm thinking that's the second thing I could do, right? Now, and it's working this year, but it might also take the idea. The third thing might be to take my students to the community, and maybe some of the lectures happen there in the community because you know that might be meaningful depending on what's going on. I might take them there to say that's where we're going to have our lectures for the next month. All right, so that might be. No university will stop you to do that. That is your freedom as a lecturer. But also, fourthly,
Prof, the university in my mind is stopping me. The university physically has no rules stopping me, but the university in my mind, which I learned from grade 1, is stopping me. I know what is professional and proper, and I know what is not proper, but it's not written anywhere.
But
It's the unwritten rules, the unwritten transcripts that I obey.
That's why the word disrupt is important. Disrupt that's that which is the university in your head. We've got to disrupt, and disrupting traditions, history is not easy, right? But we need to unleash people who can disrupt that which is seen as normal, and then start going into the community not as saviors, but as learners in the community. They are not there to collect data to say we are coming to help you solve your problem of water, but we are coming here so that together we can co-create the solution to the problem of water.
That is true. So you are open to the possibility that the knowledge you came with might not be necessary there. You might have to acquire other forms of knowledge on the field. But it is also about bringing whatever knowledge you got elsewhere and bring it into your classroom to disrupt the textbook knowledge.
Yes.
You know, universities, the higher education system and the entire education system has a thing called a textbook. A textbook is a mechanism for monitoring knowledge.
Yes.
What is in the textbook is knowledge. What is outside the textbook is not taught.
Yes.
Part of decolonizing is to deliberately disrupt that and bring in something else other than the textbook.
Yes.
Not throwing the textbook away, but let the textbook knowledge compete with other forms of knowledge.
Yes.
So that students have a plurality of choices they need to do, not a hierarchy of choice with a textbook at the top. If you pass the textbook, some people need to pass a textbook, cram the textbook in psychology, 20 chapters of textbook in order to move up. And because we structure things that way, we are forcing them to travel the route of knowledge only through one line.
Yes.
And that valley of the shadow of death is called a textbook. So we have to undo the textbook as well. Fourthly, we also have to teach students to ask questions a lot more than they answer questions.
Yes.
Because to teach students to answer questions is to teach them to subservience, is to teach them to respond, is to teach them to respond to an initiative from elsewhere. You may not realize that if you ask a student the question repeatedly, it's not only learning about the actual question, but it's learning the logic that my duty is to answer. My duty is not to ask. If I have a question, I must suppress it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because my logic of life, even when I go to work, when I get a job, I will learn to obey and be subservient and do when I'm instructed to. We have to undo those logics as well.
Yeah. And you see, that's why I think the challenge is with us professors, because many students will say, well, when you give the professor what he wants, you'll get the marks. Some professors, you give them what you think, they don't want it. And of course, some students are very good. They play the game. They say, I will disrupt afterwards because otherwise I won't get my master's. So in a way, those of us who are inside, the disruption should start there. We should, and I like this to start. What is colonial? What is colonial about what I'm teaching, how I'm teaching, or how I'm leading, or whatever? Because then you can start breaking it down. You can start breaking it down. Yeah?
I need to think about assessment in different ways.
Yes.
Not as teaching students to show that they've acquired the knowledge I gave them.
Yes.
But I need to, I do that in my own classes. I need to reward effort by students to bring what the system would have called stupid knowledge, incorrect knowledge, illogical knowledge, unscientific knowledge into a conversation about solving a problem. I must recognize that even if what they are saying is not convincing, but the effort as a logic of going beyond, I must recognize that. Because I was taught, I'm a school teacher by training, I was taught to reward bringing back what I've given them, which is to teach them a logic of only giving me what I already know. and not giving me what they already know, which might be bigger. And lastly, I think, related to that, yeah?
Go ahead, the last.
And related to that, I also think we need to change the logic of conversations that take place in our institutions, wherever we are, to move from one of, the lecture hall style.
Yes.
If the structure, the architecture makes it easier to lecture and for students to respond. But there's nothing stopping me from moving around and having conversations with the student and break the mode.
Yeah.
And the students wonder, why am I not standing where the lecturer is supposed to stand? But the system is that I refuse. I never said stand in the podium.
Yes.
The reason why I don't stand is because I learned that the podium is a logic.
Yes.
Even if I don't actually allow conversation, but the podium signals to students I am a knower, and they are the ignorant ones.
Yes.
They are the sponge that must serve up it. So I move around the class, and that is a mere practice. It looks very small, but we are changing the logic of how things are. When I talk with my students, my PhD students, we talk like I am a colleague, I am not a professor.
Yes.
Look what I do. When we talk, sometimes we talk in a group, I put my own work also on the table. It's not only their work that is being assessed. I say, look, guys, I'm also doing a chapter. Let us hit it also. Let us beat it up. So I'm not the one only who is the knower who must critique their work. I want them to critique my work. Secondly, when I give them deadlines, you need to do this in 2 months' time. I also sometimes tell them, I also need to do this in 2 months' time. So I'm not the only one who gives deadlines, but I need you to give me deadlines as a professor.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing that just to play a game, but to teach a logic.
Yeah. There's a young professor at UCT of biomedical engineering, Sudesh Sivarasu. What he does in his master's program is that there's no lectures, there's no tests, there's no exams. He gets real problems out there in the community, in offices, and then the problems are here. Students select the problem that they're going to be working on for that semester. The whole of the semester, the student is trying to solve this problem, come up with a device that solves. It's a real problem that people are waiting for this solution. You pass the course if the solution works. And students pass the course if the solution works, but some students even get a patent. Some of them get huge business, and they're here in his laboratory working with them. That's what they did for the semester. I think, you see, this is disrupting the logic of higher education. It might not, some people will say it's not decolonizing, but it is. It's because decolonization is not just about the content, it's also about, as you say, disrupting the logic. And the students love it, it's exciting. But a student whose mindset is in the logic that says, you must teach me, and then you must give me an exam so that I give you what you taught me, they will complain when they get into that lecture room. Because of course. But you are not teaching me, you are giving me a problem. And he says, if you get stuck, we talk, so we engage. Okay, so what are you doing? I can point you to where you can get resources. I can make proposals, but you get on with the problem. The solution works, you pass, and then it goes to the community.
That is a powerful pedagogy. There's a powerful way of decolonizing how we do knowledge, because it simply then makes it a co-creation of knowledge rather than a production of knowledge. The very concept of production of knowledge is the capitalist notion that somebody is a producer and another is a supplier and another is a laborer and another is a user and another is a commercializer. It's a terrible knowledge notion. We cultivate knowledge in the manner in which we cultivate relationships, we cultivate mores, we cultivate behaviors, we also cultivate food in order to make our lives a little better. And you can't cultivate alone, you cultivate with others. So we don't cultivate towards others, you cultivate with. The logic of doing with umuntu ngomuntu ngabantu. So that logic obviously will lead to resistance from students, because remember, students too are colonized.
They are colonized.
How do I know they are colonized? Is that the only way to move up the ladder is for the system to affirm you that you have acquired enough of the colonial cognitive needs, cognitive outcomes to move to the next level. The people who were least colonized are the ones who dropped out of school. They failed in being colonized. We succeeded in being colonized up to professorship. I'm a professor of a colonial education. So I can understand how students who are students of colonial education will be worried about me in stopping this logic of them listening to me, work out the 10 things I'm going, bring back the 10 things I've said. I will give them a number called 100, because that 100% is meaningful. It means something. That is the art. Now I'm changing the rules of the game when I am allowing them to shape what I do. It's very difficult to leave the colonial thing. The honest truth is that the colonial is compatible. The colonial has become normal. The colonial is easier to do, and the colonial brings least problems, and the colonial does not require us to innovate. So it's easier to do it. And that is why to decolonize is an inconvenience, because it is to go against that which is normalized, go against that which is convenient, go against that which requires the least effort for us to do. I just need to regurgitate what you told me in class. That is the order.
Yeah, true. The colonial has got a template. You just fill it up and then it works.
There are people who are called AAA, excellent students, even in my own class, who would be excellent merely because they've mastered the template, not because they've mastered knowledge. They've mastered the hidden template.
No, that's true.
If you change the rules of the game, a student who was A becomes a student who is now E. Because you've changed the rules of the game, we are decolonizing. So we must accept that decolonizing, there will be losers in the decolonizing process. There will be losers for those who have an advantage from the colonial system. It's not just white people, it's not just people who committed to Eurocentrism, but it's also some of us who have mastered the game and acquired professorship by simply bringing back to the system what the system gives us, shut out our mind and close our conscience.
You know, Sipawanda, I want to close on this controversial question because, I mean, this is a real tension. So we're saying we have succeeded in this colonial system. So in a way, we are professors because we've mastered this colonial system. At the same time, we are busy channeling people to master the colonial system so that they can become professors. Because if we don't do that, again, the young people are saying, but this system is not changing, it's too wide, bring more people. So in a way, you're like, okay, change this plane, throw it away, but bring more people. More people are struggling to, you know, if they hold their voice and they say, I want to decolonize, whatever, they might actually fail because they are failing they are failing in the colonial system. But when they fail, they are disturbing this pipeline of people who we want to get up the ladder, which the ladder where on top is just white. And do you know what I mean? Like, so sometimes I feel like, what do? Do you stop this thing and say, okay, you keep chasing this thing, keep going. When we get there, we then colonize, we decolonize. So do we say, stop the whole machine, guys? Stop the whole machine. Stop chasing this colonial education. Let's decolonize as we go with it. I mean, it's not such an easy thing, especially when you're at a higher level and you want to change at all levels.
My white colleagues ask me, so are you now going to have a class under the tree? Then I ask, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Because decolonizing does not physically working from that which is seen, because we now know that colonizing, what is colonial is not what we see.
Yes.
It is the hidden logic behind what you see. Whether you do it in a hotel or you do it under a tree, it may still be colonial. Whether I do it in Zulu or I do it in introducing Zulu to a colonial education does not make it decolonial.
Yes. Yes.
Introducing a black person, placing a black person in charge of a decolonizing team or task team does not make it colonial, because my skin color has nothing to do with colonial or not colonial.
Wow.
I am capable of being colonial and still be black.
Yes.
Because I'm capable of being black and my consciousness be white or whatever else.
Yeah. And are you capable of being decolonial whilst being white?
I suspect so, because it's a question of consciousness. It's a question of agenda you are trying to do. Because part of the logic we learned, just think about it. My 3-year daughter once asked me, why do we brown people call peach people white? Why do peach people call us brown people black? So she was still learning this logic that we are black, others are white. Because we are not actually black.
Yes.
They are actually not white. But the logic of black and white comes from the 19th century colonial science. We who are fighting colonial have come to accept the logic of blackness and the logic of whiteness as if it has embedded with meanings in it. That is different from a whiteness as a system, where that invented logic is being used to place all systems that affirm whiteness, mythical as it is, and exclude others in it. That's different. But white person as a white person is not automatically colonial, just as a black person, even one who speaks radical, is not automatically decolonial, because the proof is in the pudding. It is their consciousness, it is how they relate with others, it is how they relate with knowledge, it is how they relate with institutional cultures of universities and higher education system. Which is why installing black people at the top of universities has not helped.
Yes. Yes.
If you place them at the top of universities, as Busani Ndaweni said earlier on, they do not have power over the entire value chain.
Yes.
You are actually placing them to take responsibility for lack of transformation effort by others.
Yes.
They are simply inheriting a responsibility for a system they actually did not have time to themselves remake. Because the systems are worked such that you occupy the hierarchy, but the entire power rests somewhere else. So we have to undo that. If we are going to change it, we have to change the leadership at the same time as we change the professoriate, the Senate, at the same time as we change those who are lecturing, at the same time as we change the curriculum, at the same time as we change the conventions and the rules, at the same time as we support efforts that break the mold.
Wow.
It's not going to be one thing at a time, because what is colonial is systemic and interlinked. You can't solve it by solving 1, 2, 3, 4. The logic of let's start with curriculum and then we'll come to institutional culture. Thereafter we'll go to conventions. Doesn't work, because it was never introduced in a sequence. It was introduced all together systemically, and the responses must also be systemic.
Yes.
Otherwise you try and you will fail.
Yeah. Sipamanda, I want us to pause here, but I want to ask you a question, and it's all public. It's a logistic question. Is there something more about decolonization that we can talk about? Should we continue next week, or this is it? Do you have more to tell us?
We haven't spoken about institutional cultures. We haven't spoken about the role of actual teaching and teaching practices. We haven't spoken about the rules, the regime system, the system of regimes and rules and regulations.
Can we do that next week?
There's a lot. It's a big story.
I'm trying to get you to...
I don't have to be the one talking about it, but it is a huge story.
I understand, but I want you to commit here that you are coming back next week.
But these people will be bored with me. But I hope...
Not yet. You're going to get someone else. They are voting. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I accept.
Thank you very much.
I accept the invitation.
Thank you very much, then, Sipamanda. We'll talk again next week.
Thank you. Thanks.
This was fantastic. Thank you. That was great, guys. Professor Sipamanda Zondi, we will talk with him again next week. I hope you learned as much as I did. People are asking, what's the solution? I mean, there's ideas that he gave, there's suggestions that he gave as to where to start with humility, to recognize that we are all colonized. So this idea of calling white people the only ones who are colonized, pushing colonization, we are pushing it as well. And not by choice, but because we've mastered the colonial system so well. And it's not that we should crucify ourselves, but it's to recognize that so that we humbly work on the process of decolonizing, starting with ourselves, starting with how we relate, how we lead, how we bring others. So let's do that. We're going to speak again to Professor Sipamanda Zondi next week. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good week. All the best.